All right, good morning. I want to thank you all for joining me in yesterday's Google Meet session. I enjoyed that. Seeing y'all and hearing from y'all, and it was good. It was good stuff. So, all right. So yesterday we did overthrow of the Romanov dynasty and how they were replaced with a temporary government, and then that only lasted for about 6 months, and it gets replaced by Lenin and the Bolshevik Party, which becomes known as the Communist Party. We talked about Lenin having a stroke. I believe we talked about him having a stroke towards the end of his career. And two guys are going to argue over who takes his place, and the guy who ends up taking over is a guy named Joseph Stalin, a bad man named Joseph Stalin. So that's what today's topic is going to be. But to start with, I want to show you this video of my favorite childhood movie, Rocky IV, and it's going to show you the type of country that Joseph Stalin helped create. I hope you enjoy.
Country in his corner.
All right, so I'm a child of the '80s, and in the 1980s, we were at the very, very end of our Cold War with the Soviet Union, and they were the bad guys. Okay, hands down, they were our enemies. Like, today, America worries about, I guess, North Korea, Iran, China, terrorism. I mean, there's all sorts of things in our foreign policy today that we worry about. But growing up, it was the Soviet Union, okay? And so that was one of my favorite movies, Rocky IV. He goes over there to Russia and has to fight this communist Russian dude on steroids. But anyway, Joseph Stalin helps create that sort of situation. So like I said, he's a bad guy. He wants to form what he calls the perfect communist country, the perfect communist government. And to do that, he's going to basically try to take over every aspect of every person's life. And that's called totalitarianism. And we'll talk more about that in the days and weeks ahead. But totalitarianism is when the government literally controls everything. So I know we talked about when the Romanov family was in charge, they had a lot of power, and they were an autocracy, which is a type of government where, you have basically unlimited power. This is kind of even more powerful than an autocracy, okay? Like, they control your private life, your public life. They control literally everything, Okay, in an autocracy, the government kind of doesn't get all up in your private life, but you don't really have freedoms and rights, but you do have a little bit of privacy. In a totalitarian government, like no rights, no freedoms, no privacy, the government controls everything, and that's what Stalin is setting up here. Okay, so to do this, he creates what's called a police state. So that's when the police are always spying on you. Okay, they're secret police. You don't really know who they are, but they supervise all your activities. Tanks and armored cars are going to be used to put down riots. The secret police monitor your mail, your phone lines. You're always being spied on. Kids are told that if they hear their parents saying things against the government, kids are supposed to rat out their own parents, tattletale on their own parents. You would hear that knock on the door, and usually a lot of times it came in the middle of the night, and that meant somebody was about to disappear. Okay, so just a scary situation for sure, living in this police state. But what it does is it scares and terrifies everybody, where everybody becomes totally obedient to the government. Okay, now something Stalin is pretty famous for is called the Great Purge. Okay, so this was about a year, 1937, 1938, and he wants to get rid of everyone who might be a threat to him. Okay, and where's my marker? Here it is. Great Purge. Okay, so he's going after any potential competition, potential enemies. So he's killing a lot of non-communists. He's even killing some people in his own party who maybe aren't communist enough for him, or people who he just feels like are a threat. So this is about a year, like I said, 1937, 1938, and he's going to kill, we don't know exactly, but estimates are between 8 and 13 million people. So this is just insane. This is a really infamous thing that he did, this Great Purge, killing 8 to 13 million people. And after this year is up, there's nobody left to challenge him. So he is without a doubt in charge. Okay, so all right, so some other things that Stalin does. He uses propaganda and censorship. Okay, so newspapers, movies, books, art, radio, it was always going to be saying or showing or telling people that Stalin is awesome, Stalin is awesome, Stalin is great, Stalin is great, Stalin is the man, Stalin this, Stalin that. And if that's all you ever hear is Stalin and Stalin, 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 eventually you're going to start to believe it. And that just, we don't realize how powerful the media and how powerful the TV and how powerful movie stars are. But if they're always coming out, if you're always hearing so-and-so is awesome, or so-and-so is awesome, or so-and-so is the best, or the reverse, so-and-so is terrible, he's the worst, he's an idiot. If that's all you ever hear, you start to believe it. Okay? Think about modern day. Some of y'all, all you ever hear is, this is the worst guy ever, this is the worst guy ever, he's an idiot, he's terrible, and that's all you ever hear, and you start to believe it. Is he really as bad as they say he is? We don't really know, but just realize the media, TV, radio, your favorite singers, your favorite actors, they have a lot of influence, okay, on society. And Stalin knew this, so he really takes control of the media, the press, and it's Stalin is the best, Stalin is the best, Stalin is the best. And if you hear that enough, you start to believe it. All right. Education, indoctrination. So Stalin knew that you had to take over the schools, and you had to almost kind of indoctrinate, or brainwash maybe the kids from an early age up. So they controlled school from preschool all the way up through college, and the whole time they're being indoctrinated, brainwashed on how communism is the best, how it's the only way, the best way, how it's the best thing for the Soviet Union, how it's the best thing for the world. So they get indoctrinated at an early age. And students or teachers, nobody was allowed to question the government or communism or anything. Okay, so they taught you about sacrificing for the good of the country. You know, who cares what you need? It's all about what the Soviet Union needs. And then they had groups, kind of like the Boy Scouts, that would teach you how to be a good little communist and prepare you to be a good future communist party member. So they definitely used education. Then religion. What do you think the Soviet Union, what do you think communist countries typically do to religion? Well, Stalin tries to do away with religion, okay? He thought it was old-fashioned and dangerous. So during the whole, communism era, they tried to put an end to religion in the Soviet Union. Now, if you remember, hopefully you remember, Russians were mainly Eastern Orthodox, which is a type of Christianity dating back to Constantinople. And they kind of had to be real secretive. You know, they didn't get, most people didn't give up their religion, but they couldn't be out in the open anymore. They had to do it privately. So that's something a lot of people don't know about the Soviet Union and communism. They tried to do away with religion because they thought it was old-fashioned and dangerous. All right, so Stalin's got some plans to catch Russia up. So all semester, all year, we've been talking about how Russia's been far behind. Big part of it was geography. They were way far away, and it was always cold, and all of their ports were always frozen. Also, the Mongols conquered them and held them back for 200 years. Religiously, they were always different. They were always Eastern Orthodox, and everybody else was Roman Catholic. So we've always been talking about how Russia's just different and kind of been lagging behind. And even though people like Peter the Great, caught them up some, and then the Industrial Revolution, they're finally becoming more and more modern. It's not going to be until Stalin that they really catch up and maybe even surpass the other countries. So Stalin is going to make the Soviet Union a very powerful, very modern country, but it would not have been fun to live through. So he basically says we're going to create a command economy. So that is when the government tells businesses and factories what to do, how to do it, how much to do. So in our country, I can go open up a factory and I can make whatever I want, whenever I want, how much I want. But in a command economy, the government would tell me what to make and how much to make. And actually, we're sort of doing that a little bit right now. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but our government's been telling our factories we need ventilators and masks and medical stuff. So we're kind of in a command economy. We do that from time to time, usually during a war or during a crisis like the one we're in right now. We might sort of be a command economy, but usually we are not. Usually we have the freedom to make whatever we want, whenever we want. Well, in the Soviet Union, he's like, we're doing a command economy. So he starts telling factories what to make, how much to make, when to make, where to make. So he basically takes over the economy, all right? And he does this because he knows they're way, way behind, and he wants to catch the Soviet Union up to everybody else, and he wants to do it really fast. And that's a test question. Why does he do a command economy? Because the Soviet Union is way, way, way behind, and he wants them to catch up really fast. So he sets these goals. They're called 5-year plans. 5-year plans. And these are like goals, and they're crazy, crazy high goals. We want to make this much steel. We want to have this much coal. We want to have this many railroads. These crazy high goals for the Soviet Union, and he's literally going to work people to death to try to achieve these goals. All right. Now, they don't quite achieve the goals because they're so ridiculously high, but what it does do in the first 5-year plan, the Soviet Union really gets a lot better, gets a lot more modern, gets a lot more powerful. Then the second 5-year plan, again, the same thing. So these are just really lofty goals for the Soviet Union, and he works people to death to try to achieve these goals. And basically, the Soviet Union goes from down here to way up here in terms of wealth and power and coal output and steel output and farming. They just increased dramatically in those areas. It would have been terrible to live through, but it was really effective. Okay, really, really effective. There's this other thing called the agricultural revolution. Basically, Stalin goes around. Okay, you remember Lenin, one of the first things Lenin did is he took all this farmland and gave it out to the poor people, gave it out to the peasants. Well, now Stalin is going to go around and take all that land from them, and the government's going to take it over. So, as you can imagine, the peasants were really happy when they got the land. They're not very happy at all about him taking it over and creating these huge government farms. And a lot of them resisted, and a lot of them died. But this agricultural revolution of his is when the government started taking over all this land, created these government farms, started using more modern machinery on these government farms. And he was doing this to try to increase the food output that the Soviet Union was able to make. So again, it was effective. It wasn't something you would want to live through, especially if you were one of these peasants who was having this new land taken from you. But it is another one of the things that he does. And then women, just a little, the section ends up talking about women. Women during the Russian Revolution were considered equal to men. So now they're going to be granted access to new jobs, more education, their rights go way up, but they're working harder than ever before. They're being treated a lot like men. Okay, so the men were being forced to work really hard. Women were being forced to work really hard. But they were seeing equality, and I guess their status was improving. However, they were still expected not only to work or go to school, but they were also still expected to be mothers and have kids for future communist boys and girls. So, but overall, women's roles in society increased tremendously during the communist time period of the Soviet Union. So. All right, that's all for section 30.2. I hope this wasn't too painful for you. Make sure you do the quiz and then have a wonderful weekend. All right, we'll see you next week.